On June 23, 2025, the Persian Gulf woke up under a tension that few imagined seeing so soon. Iran, in an action that surprised the international community, launched between 6 and 10 ballistic missiles against the American airbase of Al Udeid, located in Qatar. This is not just another military installation in the Middle East. Al Udeid is the largest U.S. air base in the region, a vital strategic point for U.S. Gulf operations, responsible for coordinating recognition flights, bombing, and logistics support at conflicts ranging from Iraq to Afghanistan. But what made Iran take such a risky attitude? The answer is at events that took place a few days earlier. 3 Iranian nuclear facilities were bombarded by U.S. forces in a surgical attack that included the Fordow complex. For those who do not know, Fordow is one of the jewels of the Iranian nuclear infrastructure. Buried under a mountain and protected by reinforced concrete layers, it represents the pride of the Iranian nuclear program. Attacking this complex was a clear message from Washington. The military climbing had already exceeded all the previous boundaries. Given this, Tehran was pressured to react, not only for strategic reasons but mainly for internal reasons. The Iranian government needed to demonstrate strength for both its population and its regional allies. However, the way the attack was conducted draws attention. Even before the missiles were launched, Iran communicated both Qatar and the United States about the imminent offensive. This notice allowed an ordered evacuation of the Al Udeid base troops and the complete activation of anti-aircraft defense systems. As a result, virtually all missiles were intercepted in the air. The absence of human victims has avoided a greater tragedy, but did not reduce the political and psychological impact of the episode. The world watched in real time the first time in decades a country launched a direct ballistic attack on an American military base on foreign soil. The Qatar, although not suffered significant material damage, was not silent. In an official statement, the Qatari government condemned the attack and said it reserves the right to respond to Iran with the same intensity. This statement cannot be seen as mere rhetoric. Qatar, although small, has one of the best-equipped Gulf armed forces, with modern combat planes and a state-of-the-art missile arsenal. More than that, the threat of retaliation opens the possibility of a new regional actor entering directly on the conflict that, until then, was restricted to the United States, Israel, and Iran. But the consequences did not stop there. As an immediate measure of safety, Qatar decided to close their airspace indefinitely. This decision caused real chaos in international air traffic. Flights that crossed routes between Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and other Gulf cities were forced to divert their trajectories, causing large-scale delays and cancellations. The repercussion in the air sector was immediate, but the domino effect also reached the financial markets. The price of oil, which in the previous days came up due to the tensions in the region, reacted unexpectedly. They plummeted. Analysts pointed out that the market interpreted the attack as a demonstration of weakness from Iran. After all, an attack announced in advance, against an emptied base and with intercepted missiles, seemed more a propaganda action than a real offensive. Behind all this, one fact draws attention: the growing vulnerability of Iran before the Israeli offensive. Even as Tehran launched his missiles against Qatar, Israel continued its operations within the Iranian territory, reaching strategic targets with surgical accuracy. Reports indicate that, in recent weeks, Israel bombed military facilities, intelligence centers, and even symbolic locations such as Evan's arrest, located in the heart of Tehran. These frequent and successful attacks have made it clear to the world that Iran at this time is unable to prevent Israeli aerial raid. This raises worrying questions. How far is Iran willing to scale the conflict? How long will the United States and their allies be able to maintain control of the situation? Meanwhile, on the other side, Russia entered the board. During a meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Vladimir Putin, made a point of condemning American attacks, classifying them as a violation of Iranian sovereignty and a threat to regional stability. However, the Russian president also made it clear that Russia will not provide direct military support to Iran. This commitment, for now, will be limited to the diplomatic field. This Moscow positioning puts even more pressure on Tehran, which sees its increasingly restricted military options. While the world tried to understand the implications of the Iranian attack on Qatar, Another explosive event dominated the headlines: the intensification of Israeli bombings within the Iranian territory. Israel, who in recent weeks had been conducting a campaign of precision attacks on military facilities and intelligence centers in Iran, has taken advantage of the distraction caused by the attack on Al-Udeid to further advance on his offensive. Sources of intelligence revealed that, just 48 hours after the release of Iranian missiles, Israel carried out at least 5 new operations within Iran. Among the targets were missile deposits, Revolutionary Guard bases, and even the arrest of Evin, a symbol of the Iranian regime, known for housing political prisoners and government opponents. The explosions in Tehran were heard miles away, and the images of the smoke columns rising from the Iranian capital ran the world. Another decisive factor was the training of Israeli pilots. Unlike many air forces in the region, Israeli pilots go through one of the most demanding and extensive training programs in the world. They constantly train in scenarios that simulate exactly situations like this: hostile airspace penetration, missile evasion, precision bombing on protected targets. In addition, Israel performs joint exercises with allied countries, learning to operate in multiple war theaters and to deal with air defense technologies similar to those Iran had. Israeli doctrine values the ability to make a rapid decision-making, even under extreme pressure. Pilots are encouraged to think autonomously, quickly adapting to scenario changes, something fundamental in a campaign with so many variables and risks. The morale of the troop was also a differential. While the Iranian forces dealt with chaos and surprise, Israeli riders operated with an unusual level of confidence. The certainty that they had technological superiority, detailed intelligence, and total tactical support was an important psychological fuel for the success of the missions. But the results of this offensive were not restricted to the military field. The strategic impact began to be felt in the diplomatic and geopolitical spheres. The Iranian government was forced to adopt a defensive stance, avoiding scaling the conflict immediately, aware that any miscalculated retaliation could have even more devastating consequences. In the international comparison, many analysts began to draw an inevitable parallel with the Ukraine war. While Russia, even after campaign years, failed to gain total air domain over Ukraine, Israel showed that with the right combination of technology, intelligence, preparation, and strategy, it is possible to achieve complete air supremacy in a short time. This difference even more evidently exposed the importance of full integration between Air Force, electronic war, and cybership in the modern battlefield. The success of Israel's air campaign against Iran was not just a tactical or operational achievement. It was, above all, a demonstration of how modern war evolved into a new level, where the mastery of airspace decides, within days, the course of an entire conflict. With the aerial supremacy won, Israel now has a strategic advantage that goes far beyond the ability to perform airstrikes. Having control of heaven means having freedom of action. Israel can choose where and when attacking, can fly over sensitive installations without being detected, and can continue to neutralize threats even before they materialize. Iran, on the other hand, is in a situation of chronic vulnerability. Its already limited retaliation has been further weakened. Even if they tried to reposition their defenses or move strategic weapons, Israeli intelligence, with its continuous surveillance apparatus by satellites, drones, and electronic espionage, would know in advance. The psychological impact of this new reality is also deep. Knowing that your skies are no longer protected alters the behavior of the Iranian military command. Every strategic movement now needs to be thought of with the fear of a surprise attack from any direction and at any time. In addition, this air supremacy also serves as a direct message to other actors in the region. Countries that for years have questioned or challenged Israel's military capacity now have a new comparison parameter. The message is clear. Israel is willing and trained to perform large-scale offensive operations, even against opponents who were previously considered untouchable. A technical but extremely relevant detail is the speed with which Israel conducted this operation. While traditional aerial campaigns often take weeks or months to establish dominion, Israel has achieved its goals in a matter of days. This speed was decisive to prevent a coordinated response from Iran and to keep the elements surprised until the last moment. The choice of targets also followed a systemic weakening logic. It was not just about destroying military equipment. Israel focused on targets with symbolic and strategic value, Communication centers, ammunition deposits, radar stations, missile launch bases, and command centers. Even government buildings and media were attacked to destabilize the regime on several fronts simultaneously. This method resembles the concept of network war, where different types of force, air, cyber, electronic, and intelligence operate in an interconnected manner, each enhancing the effect of the other. It was exactly this synergy that missed Russia in Ukraine, and now Israel has shown to master with mastery. Looking to the future, Iran will have to completely review its air defense doctrine. Reinforcing only anti-aircraft batteries will not be enough. The country will have to invest heavily in advanced detection systems, in defensive cyber war and modernization of its air force, which, given the international sanctions and the economic difficulties of the regime, will be a huge challenge. Meanwhile, Israel already reaps the fruits of the campaign. In addition to ensuring its national security in the short term, the country has gained a dissuasive power that should last years. Each opponent potential now knows that if it challenges Tel Aviv militarily, it will face an air force with proven capacity to nullify defenses, penetrate hostile airspaces, and destroy strategic targets with surgical speed. For international military analysts, this Israeli operation enters history as one of the most successful examples of integrated air war in the modern era. A case of study for military academies, a warning for nations with conventional defense systems, and a reminder to the world that air superiority remains, perhaps more than ever, the most determining factor on the battlefield. The message that remains is simple and direct. Who dominates the heavens, dominates the war. Israel, in turn, continued its offensive within Iran. Non-official sources reported attacks on new strategic targets such as ballistic missile research centers and underground ammunition deposits. The Israeli message is clear. As long as Iran continues with its aggressive rhetoric, military operations will not stop. In the diplomatic field, the UN Security Council summoned an emergency meeting. However, as in previous crises, the division between permanent members made any practical resolution difficult. Russia, aligned with Iran on some guidelines, used its veto to block a formal conviction to Tehran. Already China, despite criticizing the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, avoided taking a hard position against Iran. In fact, the closure of Hormuz, who at first seemed a threat, began to materialize. Satellite images showed dozens of Iranian military vessels positioned at strategic points along the narrow. Anchored tank ships awaited instructions, while American and British destroyers patrolled the area ready to act. Military analysts point out that if there is an attempt to intervene maritime traffic, the risk of direct confrontation between naval forces of Iran and the United States is very high. Any exchange of fire could ignite the region irreversibly. China, concerned about power supply, has started discreet behind the scenes negotiations to convince Iran to retreat. Beijing sent a diplomatic delegation to Tehran, offering a way out of relief from some commercial sanctions in exchange for an Hormuz reopening. However, so far, the Iranian government has not given signs that it will give in. Internally, Iranian leadership faces a dilemma. Cedar can now be seen as weakness, especially after the Qatar attack and before the Israeli bombing campaign. But keeping climbing means risking a war on multiple fronts, against Israel, against the United States, and possibly against other Gulf countries. In the international market, instability is felt every minute. Oil oscillates violently. Value bags react with panic and euphoria peaks. Investors flee at risk assets and the dollar fires. And behind all this, one question remains unanswered. Was the Iranian attack on Qatar just an isolated movement or the prelude to a major regional conflict? For now, what the world saw was a carefully choreographed action by Tehran, focusing more on internal propaganda than in real impact. But the risk of an uncontrolled climb is real, very real, and every new decision made in Tehran, Washington, Tel Aviv, or Doha may be the next step towards a conflict that no one seems to avoid.